Hey, everybody, it's me, Robert Phoenix. I'm back with the Astro Weather. I'm trying to look professional today. So I have this blue-collared shirt on. Kind of looks good against the background. But I'm going to maybe bring the collars in a little bit. What do you think? So look, maybe I'm trying to look like a professional astrological weatherman today. Maybe I should wear a suit, put a tie on. Yeah, I don't know. A little too buttoned up. Anyway, how is everybody? It is, wow, man, the weather, it's getting intense, getting really intense. So we're going to look at that today. And I hope everybody had a good weekend. I do miss doing the show on Mondays, to be honest with you, but I also like sleeping in a little bit on Mondays. Let's get into it, man. This is an intense time. I ain't gonna lie. I ain't lying. Here we go. Let's do it. All right. So one of the things that I was really experiencing yesterday was this Mars-Pluto opposition. And man, I don't get into many beefs on Twitter. Yesterday was all beef Monday. I had a carnivore diet on Twitter yesterday, and it was very kind of intense. So I can gauge where people are at by sort of the temperature or the mood on social networks, and it was angry yesterday. There was an angry buzz in the air, and I had to block some people, which I don't normally like to do. But if they're going to be assholes and start trolling, they get fucking blocked. So we got this Mars-Pluto opposition and kicking in. Right. Yesterday, what happened? There was something that, oh, yes, we're going to talk about it on 15 minutes. But it was the train. It was the 30 tons of ammonia going missing from a train. I believe it was in the Mojave Desert, of all places. I mean, that just sounds like the beginning of a Bond movie or something like that. 30 tons of ammonium nitrate goes missing in the Mojave Desert. You can just kind of see the machinations and, all the things that are going along to decouple the car and this and that, right? It's like a fucking movie. But the stock market took a bit of a hit yesterday. And kind of in the background, it was a background program because of this thing with the train. Very interesting. The other thing to pay attention to is earth stuff, earth changes. Popocatépetl. I always have a kind of a tortured relationship with that word. Popocatépetl, the dormant volcano in Mexico, seems to be active. And here we go. We have Jupiter right here in Taurus, square Pluto, square Mars. Those are explosive volcanic aspects, right? So just let's look at this. We have Popocatépetl active. We have 30 tons of ammonium nitrate missing, and we have people on Facebook just kind of going postal. This is the energy we're dealing with right now. And I talked about this last week. It is not ideal. And we're going to have Mars and Leo through the majority of the late spring, early summer, and it's going to be hot. And I think temperatures are going to raise and tempers are going to raise. There's a lot of feelings of indignance right now with Mars and Leo. I talked about this again, I think last week. We've had Mars in Cancer for a while, which is a very passive aggressive expression of Mars. And Mars and Leo is just aggressive, but it's aggressive with an attitude. It's aggressive with an extra twist of ego that's involved. And so this is a really interesting time. Like, you know, we're all invested in our identities to some degree. Notice I use the word identity versus ego. The whole idea of the ego is, it was the whole ego thing was like the ego didn't exist until Freud came up with it. Right? What did people do before Freud came up with this idea of the ego? And then all of a sudden we have an ego, thanks to Freud. And Freud, by the way, has been proven to be absolutely wrong on a lot of fronts. Not only wrong, but his practices were terrible. So does that mean that you can't grab something from the imperfect teacher or the imperfect practitioner? Not really, because sometimes you can. But that's a really good question. You know, we talked about pride prior to ego. We use that word pride. Oh, he has a lot of pride. He has too much pride, right? And there's a difference between pride and ego. And then it became all about, well, you got to eliminate your ego. You got to destroy your ego. And even John Lennon got to a point where I think he went on some, far out acid trip, and he realized that he didn't want to destroy his ego. And that was the guy that really wanted to destroy his ego. And he didn't. Well, why is that? It's because the ego brings you experiences, theoretically. Take the word ego out of it. What is it? It's personality. Personality brings you experiences, for better or worse. So we get a lot of personality with Mars and Leo. A lot of people wanting to flex with Mars and Leo. And there's some interesting components here. So we have the moon. We've come off the new moon that happened over the weekend. And we have the moon right here in Cancer and conjunct Venus, right? And it's not a bad aspect. In fact, they're right on top of each other. I believe they call it Cazimi. So with Venus Moon conjunct, we're really thinking about, again, these conservative values that are associated with the sign. This is a kind of an interesting moment this morning. And the moon is on its way to Mars, right? So it's not quite at the midpoint, but later in the day, tonight, the moon will be at the Venus-Mars midpoint. And so that's where your emotions are mediating your actions and your agreements. So keep an eye out for later tonight. There's a lot of instinctual energy in the air today. And we've got both of these planets squaring Chiron. And I'm going to get into more of this on my 15 Minutes of Flame show. But there is some disturbing, unsettling, I'll use the word unsettling chatter going on right now. And again, I referenced the 30 tons of ammonium nitrate going missing and it being very explosive, right? This is explosive energy. Mars, Pluto opposition, squaring Jupiter, that shit is explosive. And when you get into Mars, Leo, my sense here with Mars, Leo, from a social perspective, is that we're going to be talking about things like white nationalists, Christian nationalists, white terrorists, anything that fits into that camp. Mars and Leo will be part of that discussion. And when we get into that, and everybody thinks they're fucking right with Mars and Leo. They've got the answer, or they've got the righteous marching orders. This is what Mars and Leo is going to bring us. And eventually it is going to catch up with Black Moon Lilith. And that's going to be really interesting. We have Pallas out front. So there's patterns going on here, right? There's patterns. Mars is going to catch up with Pallas. So this idea that we can have a sense as to what's happening, we put things together. We put the Popocatépetl together with the ammonium nitrate, together with the kind of explosive feeling that people have around this whole border crisis thing, which I haven't even broached. And the pattern and the perception of the patterns will eventually meet with Mars, which is the executioner of the pattern. This is going to be a really interesting time over the next couple of weeks, and not an easy one. And we already have the sun in Gemini, which is, man, it's like a hall of mirrors. The other thing too, I'm going to talk a little bit about this on my 15 show, is AI. AI is, once Pluto went into Aquarius, you could just track the trajectory of AI. It was like just up and to the right. It went quantum. Chat GPT, while it was being worked on prior to Pluto and Aquarius, it really came alive during Pluto and Aquarius. And I was thinking about, I was thinking about it. I was chatting with Shadow last night, and we were talking about what could happen in a crisis situation where AI is involved, right? So there was an AI, they say it was an AI video, and Bloomberg, I believe, posted it, of the Pentagon smoking. And let's say, for instance, you didn't know it was AI, and you were shown maybe a 30-second clip of the Pentagon smoking created by AI. How many people would know the difference? We're entering like War of the Worlds territory here. And now I'm going sort of social big. We're in War of the Worlds territory here. We don't, especially with the sun in Gemini, we have multiple realities or multiple situations that could all be happening simultaneously. Some of them might actually be real, and some of them may not be real. I would really pay attention to the 27th and 28th degree of Gemini when it moves into square with Neptune. So we're 25, 26 days out from that. And that's where I think this whole idea of reality gets very tested. It's very fluid, fraught with reflection. What's real, what's not real. We're entering into that phase right now. This is a very weird time, and how do you handle it? I mean, now we're dealing with the so-called mundane, or the social, or the collective, or the global, whatever you want to call it, interpenetrating our lives. And so how do we deal with some of these things? That's a good question. Mars is still in trine with Neptune, so there is the creative potential here. But I feel like it's a different creative potential than Mars in Cancer, where and it's early. It won't be this way. Eventually, when Mars moves out into, the 27th, 28th degree, we'll have an inconjunct with Neptune. That's a whole other story. But it's a different creative potential because Mars in Leo is fiery. So I feel like if you are inspired or you're feeling passionate about getting something done, don't sleep on it, because you're going to get kind of an extra burst. When Mars was in those final degrees of Cancer, I mean, we could go back to like 22, 23 Mars in Cancer, and putting it in the third decan, which was Piscean. So you had a Piscean Mars decan connecting in with Neptune and Pisces, and there was some nice flow there, right? By the time he gets to 27, 28, 29. There's nothing, really, there's not much left. So Mars has been reincarnated into a new sign. So there's energy, right? There's energy in Mars. And we still have this unique trine with Neptune, which can be very inspired, but it doesn't last very long. When Mars kind of moves out of that orb, so it's already at a 4-degree orb. I would say by the time it gets to 7 degrees, 7-degree orb, which would be 3 degrees more, which would be by the end of the weekend, a lot of that energy is dissipated. So I would say if you have a creative impulse, don't sit on it, right? Like work it, get into it. And it can be very inspired in some ways. That's one way that you can deal with what's going on. And I think there's a lot of tension in the air. I mean, that's what I've been experiencing. Sun-Saturn square right here. A lot of tension. And, this is us defining ourselves against things like authority and administrative powers. And in Gemini, we're trying to find workarounds. We're trying to find, we'll use the word hacks, right? We're trying to find things in Gemini that help facilitate, speed up our everyday world and our everyday processes. That's how Gemini works. Gemini wants shortcuts. And with the Sun-Saturn square, you're dealing with limitations. Limitations aren't always bad, right? They force you, especially with the Sun in Gemini, to find workarounds. We have a Sun-Pluto trine, which is not a bad trine, actually. So this little cap here, right? Sun, sextile Neptune, trine Pluto. It's interesting. It's interesting. I would say if you run into a no situation, you can find a workaround. You can find a yes with your no situation. Don't give up. Do not give up, especially like in the first 5 degrees of Gemini because of that Pluto trine. Don't give up. Keep going. Keep going. Kind of push through it, right? It's like in here, we're dealing, especially early on, with this sextile with Neptune. Again, mathematically, it's watery. So what happens when water runs into, well, it's air watery. It's air liquid. What happens when water runs into an obstacle, goes around it? So there's some of that here with the Sun Neptune sextile. So when you run into opposition, kind of go around it. I would say don't confront it. When you get into Gemini, you're kind of in trickster territory. And there's this really fine line of being self-interested versus, what's the word I'm looking for? Selfish. I remember there was a time back in my corporate days when I really wanted to go to the Winter Music Festival in Miami, and my media boss didn't want me to go. And I did something I should never have done. I went above him and I went to the head of marketing. He said I should definitely go. So my boss he was pissed, and it kind of altered our relationship for a while. And that was kind of a workaround, right? At the end of the day, did it ultimately damage my relationship with him? Like, no, it didn't, because we were friends later on and after that. But in the moment, it was probably not the coolest thing to do. But, I wanted to go to Miami. And I wanted them to pay for it. So that's kind of like the Sun-Neptune sextile. You're finding workarounds. But there's that fine line between the workaround and being self-interested and being self-centered and selfish. You'll find out what that is. Right. It's an interesting time for navigating in that territory. Mercury is still in Taurus, and it's moving out of this Pluto square. Yesterday it was intense. Yesterday was intense. Communication was intense yesterday. Really intense. But it's moving away from that. So it's moving out of the square, Pluto square. It's still there today. By later today, early tomorrow, it's at 9 degrees. The square is kind of dissipating. It isn't square with Mars too. That was part of the argumentative energy yesterday. Mars was at, I think, 1 and Mercury was at 7. So in that tight orb, it was tighter yesterday. And that's why there was a lot of tension in the air yesterday. So this is a very interesting day. And again, getting back to this moon, Venus conjunction, square Chiron, people are not feeling all that safe right now. That's my sense. Maybe I'm projecting onto my tingly, spidey senses here. But I think this is people not really feeling, oh man, there's something going on here. Or are we looking for confirmation bias? That's the other thing. Because with Gemini, sometimes I feel like we're looking for confirmation bias. We'll start off with a premise and we'll try to find the confirmation bias for the premise. It's a very Gemini thing. So you have to really test in some ways what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you think is going on, right? We haven't talked a lot about Jupiter. Jupiter moved into Taurus. I talked a little bit about it on Sunday night, and it's a very interesting Jupiter, right? It's exalted in Taurus. And as I mentioned before, the last 2 Jupiter and Taurus cycles did not produce like great wealth. If anything, there were some tectonic shifts of wealth, especially in 2000. But we have Jupiter now creeping up on the true node, and it'll be there by Thursday, Friday. That'll be very interesting because true node is kind of moving towards Jupiter. So it's a collision, right? It's a collision. And you would look at it and say, oh, well, this is great. This is very fortuitous. Sometimes, yes, right? Jupiter just makes more of something, makes it bigger. And when it conjuncts the true node in Taurus, depending on what's going on with everything else, and we do have a sextile to Saturn, which I think is better. It sort of helps some of this dynamic tension, but it's still going to be in square with Pluto. And I feel like people are going to have a sense that they want more resources. Like, this is what I'm feeling. Like, there's a sense that they don't have enough. Like, we don't have enough, whatever that enough is. Maybe it's the e-ticket to the underground condo for the continuity of government. But I don't necessarily think at this stage that Jupiter is signifying happy days are here again. I think it's bringing us more of a sense of what we have and what we don't have. And maybe what other people want to have and that they don't want us to have. Anyway, there's just more of it here. And then, Jupiter is eventually, Mercury's a little bit faster than Jupiter. So this is about as close as this conjunction is going to get. Like, Mercury's going to start to move on a little bit. But if you take all this into account, this is a lot of Taurus, starting with Uranus. And we have the sextile with Uranus and Venus moon. And that's really quick. That's fast. But, it's also instinctual. So you're going to have to trust your instincts to take advantage of this Venus moon sextile. In terms of relationships, this could be meeting somebody very, very quickly. It's not always like, if you want to start a long-term relationship, Venus Uranus aspects, sextiles, trines, I would say trines might have a more long-term effect or long-term potential in a relationship, whereas sextiles are very fast. So this is a very rapid meeting of people that you feel some sort of kin or affinity towards. And that's in the air today, right? But it's also instincts. How much do you trust your instincts? Are your instincts a manifestation of fear? Are your instincts a heightened state of fight or flight? Question mark. The answer to both those questions is yes, right? Yes. So you have to peel away from your fear to trust your instincts. That's kind of where we are, right? The square to Chiron is like the animals in the forest smelling smoke, or the animals in the forest having a sense. Like you'll see these migrations before earthquakes start when the animals. It's kind of like that, right? It's kind of like that with this square to Chiron. How fast are you willing to act? That's the question here. Interesting day. Very, very interesting day. Interesting times. Try to stay out of fear. You know, when the South Node gets right down into these last degrees of Scorpio, the fears are rampant. You know, it's like this. Here is the most potent expression of the South Node. So we're getting down to 3, 2, 1, first decan. And in Scorpio, this shit has to come up and come out. So we're going to get into the pole shift, which is really the shift between the nodes, Aries and Libra coming up here. But it's the final countdown for the South Node in Scorpio and the true node in Taurus. You notice how I said final countdown? Okay, here we go. Let's look at the star of the day. I'm trying to be optimistic, by the way, and I'm trying to find some positivity. But it's weird because the positivity is with these kind of out of element alignments, like Sun sextiling Neptune, but air, water, Mars trining Neptune, fire, water. There's a little bit of alchemy in there. A little bit of alchemy. So if the universe brings you lemons, make chicken salad. Okay. Star of the day. Pretty economical. All right. Today was easy. Well, kind of easy. There were a couple of people that it's going to be easy with Gemini. It's going to be really easy with Gemini. You know why? Because Gemini is a type. Now, it is a type that has many different folds and fractals. I'm not here to pigeonhole Gemini. A lot of people say, I hate Gemini. I don't hate Gemini. I find it fascinating. Come on, Gemini is my 7th house. I got a relationship with Gemini. But there are things about Gemini that are absolutely, utterly, 100% true. And you can find it through every sign. But Gemini is definitely a type. We'll have fun with it. Today's no different. We're gonna start the fun off. When we think of Gemini, what do we think of? We think of puzzles, information, trivia, right? Those are all Gemini things. And who might be the most Gemini of the Gemini in that territory today? None other than the current host of Jeopardy, Ken Jennings. He looks like a smarmy prick, doesn't he? I'm sorry. He kind of looks like a smarmy prick. And kind of he is, actually. He's had some pretty smarmy tweets. He's gotten in trouble with some of his tweets. Little Ken there. That's Gemini. But you can totally see how smart this guy is, right? He's got Mercury in Gemini. He's got the moon in Gemini. He's born on a new moon, conjunct the South Node. So he's bringing something forward, right? He's bringing this emotional connection to triviality in a lot of way, right? Like he's hardwired for this. And I tell you, Mercury moon conjunctions are pretty amazing for memory, right? Like the moon is absorbs. I've got a Mercury moon conjunction in my chart. And so I'm pretty familiar with how it works. And if I hadn't spent, a large portion of my early life destroying brain cells, my memory would be even better. But this guy's got a great memory. He's got a fucking great memory. You could just see it here, right? And he's smart. Mercury and Gemini, and he's smarmy. And he's got this trine with Uranus. Hello, right? Trine with Uranus. And now this is the guy that set the record for the most consecutive wins on Jeopardy. And not only is he smart, but he's got some staying power. Saturn Uranus trines. Saturn Uranus trines, if the individual has it placed in an interesting position, interpenetrate the mainstream. Saturn's the mainstream. And that's what Ken Jennings did. He sort of, took the Jeopardy world and TV world and game show world by storm. I mean, this guy is, what would you call him? He's like the, trying to come up with a rock star analogy. He's not a rock star, though. When you try to come up with these analogies, okay, so remember when John Denver was a really big deal? He's like the John Denver of game show world. John Denver was kind of a rock star, but he was also kind of goofy. He's like the John Denver of the game show world. But he took it by storm, and I guess now he's the host of Jeopardy. And you can just see how quick, like Mercury and Gemini is already fast. Come on. You throw Uranus into the mix. By the way, the guy's a software engineer, IT guy. That's what he was doing before he went on his historic run in Jeopardy and became famous. It's really interesting how he lost the string. He lost it to this person who kept it really close because Ken had fucked up on a double Jeopardy and lost a bunch of money. And so it was within striking distance. This person was within striking distance of Ken Jennings. And it came down to this one question in Final Jeopardy. And he didn't get it. And she did. And it was about what job is popular for 4 months out of the year. And she, is a company. What company basically exists for 4 months out of the year? And she got it right. It was H&R Block because of tax season. And he did what, UPS or some shit like that. So he lost. And when he lost, it was shocking, right? And that's the Uranian effect on the midheaven. It's shocking. And some of his tweets are shocking, actually. He made fun of Barron Trump. He made fun of somebody in a wheelchair one time. I think it was one of his tweets. And what did he say? He said something along the lines of, isn't it depressing when there's someone who's hot in a wheelchair or something like that, right? And all these disability advocates got really pissed off at him. And that's also the South Node. Like, he'll put his foot in his mouth sometimes. And even with Sagittarius rising in that true node there, sometimes he's a bit blunt, right? He's kind of blunt. And at times he's very, very crafty. So his son, I thought this was interesting too. His son is in the fifth house and kind of at the end of the fifth house, but the fifth house rules things like games and pastimes and game shows and what to do. Boom, he's got that Sun Pluto trine. This is a determined dude, right? You look at him, God, I just want to slap him. But he's a determined dude. He's not somebody he's not going to lay down, right? He's not going to lay down. He's got this Jupiter-Mars trine, and Jupiter is in Pisces. But it's a really interesting Mars trine. So he's able to tap into his Mars and kind of work things, right? And when he's in the flow, when this guy's in the flow, he's in the flow for, I don't know how many games he was champion, but that was a big flow. But he's got some issues. And it's just, I think he's got a bit of a temper and he can be peevish. He's got that Mars square Venus, Mars square Chiron, and Mars square Uranus. He's married. He's a He's a Mormon. That's the other thing with him. He's a Mormon. He went on a mission. You know where he went on a mission to? Spain. Like, who the fuck goes on a Mormon mission in Spain? I'm not here to insult Mormons, by the way. But usually when you think of Mormon missions, you're thinking of Tonga, Samoa, Africa. Ken Jennings goes to Spain. Pluto, ninth house, right? Yeah. I'm going to go over there and eat some paella and save some souls. Pluto Saturn square. He almost did not become part of Jeopardy because his tweets were polarizing. Hey, how about that? Mr. Gemini was polarizing. And they were afraid that the sponsors would shy away from him. You know, when you get into this position, buddy, you got to watch your tweets. So it's that Saturn Pluto square. He's got Saturn in the seventh house, so that's commitment. Honestly, when I was looking at his chart, I didn't know what his marital status was. He is married. I think he has one kid. I thought to myself, is this guy gay? Right? Mars in the seventh house, dude, square Venus, square Uranus. I don't know. There may be something unresolved about it. I'm not saying he is. This is not just question mark. Not that it matters. Not that he's married. And so I found that out. And there's this dutiful Saturn in the seventh house. It's an interesting chart for sure. I think at times he might feel misunderstood, believe it or not. Nice placement of Neptune in the 12th house. Opposing his sun, probably his Mormon mission stuff, but I think he might feel misunderstood at times. People with Neptune sun oppositions often feel misunderstood. It's not like quite being in the 12th house, but it's sort of like the veil of the 12th house in a lot of ways. What else? Jupiter Neptune square. That is almost a calculation of enormous faith, sometimes too much faith. Pallas in Aquarius, second house. I got to think this would help him in the game show world. You got to think it would help him. Aquarius is fast. Second house is money, right? And when you play, you know, I tried out for Jeopardy one time. And I actually got to the level where you take a Jeopardy, it's like a general knowledge test. And I got to that level and I didn't make the cut. Sad to say, but I got to that level. And there were people that they plucked out of our group that would wind up being on the show. So I was a kind of an avid watcher of Jeopardy for a while. And there are patterns in the show, right? Like you have to look at things like, what is it? Potent potables. Potent potables. That's a pattern. Like, well, what's a potable? Well, it's something you drink. What's potent? It's going to be alcohol. So you know automatically the pattern of the category. I think having Pallas in Aquarius in the second house is a major, major boost. This guy was built for fucking game shows. I don't know about his marriage or his relationships, but he was built for game shows. And now he's the new host of Jeopardy. That's your star of the day, Mr. Ken Jennings. Dun, 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 dun. All right, little levity. Smart motherfucker. I've been watching I hate to say this. I've been watching a lot of, I don't really hate to say it. The only reason I hate to say it is because I probably watch too much. Reruns of Curb Your Enthusiasm, just snippets, like 4 or 5 minute snippets. But those 4 or 5 minute snippets, which are very Gemini, it's like, oh, it's only 4 or 5 minutes. Once I watch this 4 or 5 minute video, I'll get right to my stuff. Oh, here's another one. It's only 4 or 5 minutes. Right? Next thing you know, I've watched 20 4 or 5 minute videos of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And guess what it's going to lead to? It's going to lead to a big astrological dive on Larry David. It's going to be fun. Very fun. All right. If you like this show, maybe you'd like some of the other things I do. Maybe. Right there. 15 minutes of flame. Going to happen 9:11 a.m. Central Standard Time, Tuesday through Thursday. And of course, my man Chris, the mad scientist, over at True Hemp Science, which is the one and only sponsor of the show besides my own business, robertphoenix.com. We always like to mention Chris and give him, let's see. That's way too much Larry David. Larry David is a comedic genius. He's a comedic fucking genius. Although there are parts of Larry David I don't like. I'll leave those out for now. All right, hold on. Let's see. Where are we? Yeah, here we go. Let's talk about True Hemp Science. I don't know what's going on with the best CBD in Austin. Maybe you can still vote. If you can't, throw my friend Chris a vote. You could do that at the very least, just vote. But if you want to, if you want some of the best CBD, man, I got to tell you, the Moon Dust gummies are your friend. They're your friend. So are the sleep gummies. And there's a bunch of other stuff on here that can really be an enhancement to your everyday health regime. So don't sleep on CBD, especially some of the best you'll find. And if you go here and you buy $100 or more, guess what's going to happen? You're going to type in 15MINS, and that'll qualify you for free goodies. And everybody likes free goodies. Free shipping, over $150, always a 30-day money-back guarantee. True Hemp Science. All right. Go forth and conquer. Have a great day. And join us over on 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm supposed to, apparently there's a lag between the when I say goodbye and the show ending. And I don't like to sit here until the show ends. I can't do it. So I'm just going to sit here for a while